the other one is just her character, right? Yes, but she's but
everyone, how are you all? It's great to have you here with us. And this is Hacking Chrome, Accessibility for All, or Chromebook and G Suite Accessibility. We'll talk about a little bit of those types of things. A couple of things I want to cover real quick before we introduce ourselves so you know who you're talking to if you care. First, I noticed that I turned on closed captioning within Google Slides. If you're not familiar, Google Slides has that embedded. So it's really a good idea when we talk about accessibility to actually be accessible to all of our learners in the room. The second part of that is, even though it's really probably an uncomfortable thing for us as educators, no matter who we are, to stand behind a podium and present from here. This is not my comfort zone, but we also understand that we're using the microphone for that particular reason, because we want to make sure that everybody, whether they're on the live stream or recording, or if it's in the very back, us just stepping out into the middle of the room and saying, I'm sure you can all hear us, right? Is not an accessible thing for us to be doing. So wanted to make sure that we cover that. So I'm hoping that I articulate enough for this to pick up the actual words, but I do know that me in particular, I do tend to slur my words and things of that particular nature, because I do have the bad presentation habit of having gum in my mouth. I just realized that, so it's probably going to not come over so well. But anyway, it's a great tool for us as educators and students to use. Secondly, or I don't even know, that might be number 12 on the list, please use the rule of 2 feet, maybe getting you to share some of the things that we've missed. But use the rule of 2 feet, and by that I mean, if you are not getting what you need here, or you have all that you need, 5 minutes, 15 minutes, 35 minutes into it, take your 2 feet and go somewhere else that would be more appropriate for you. We aren't going to be offended, all right? You're not going to offend us. You're not going to offend everybody around you. That's just the way that this works. I mean, if you're going to try to split your time between us and the one that's 3 down, please feel free to do that. So make sure that you use that. And lastly, and probably most importantly, if you have something to share, please just let us know. Signal us, yell, hey you, dude, excuse me, whatever it is that's appropriate for you, let us know, because the topic of technology and accessibility is so broad, and there are so many things to squeeze into an hour-long conversation that we definitely can't get all of that in here. And you know, we're not going to talk about a lot of the AT devices or any of those types of things. We're going to talk about some things here within Chrome and go through those pieces. So without further ado, my name is Tim Smith. There is my hashtag, or my Twitter handle. You can feel free to reach out to either me or Chris as you see fit. But I am the Supervisor of Instructional Practice and Technology Integration at Red Lion Area School District. Red Lion is about 30 to 40 minutes south of southwest of Hershey. So it's a little bit further drive for us to get here. We were so used to, those of you who are from Pittsburgh, just sleeping in our own bed at night, driving in. There's not nearly as much parking issues in Hershey as there are here in Pittsburgh, but nonetheless, that's what we were so used to. So we're happy to be able to bring the spirit and the joy of central Pennsylvania. We don't have chocolate, we probably should have done that, but we're happy to be able to come to you here in Pittsburgh and bring central Pennsylvania with us. So I have a background, 20-some years in education. Started as a social studies teacher, building administrator, and now I'm in charge of district technology, as well as all other duties as assigned. Those of you who are administrators or have other roles outside of the classroom, you know what that is. So I'm going to kick it over to Chris to have him introduce himself and go through a couple of things. And we look forward to learning with you as the rest of the conference goes, and also maybe learning a little bit here in this session. So thanks so much for choosing our session and coming out here today.
Hey guys, like Tim said, my name is Chris. So, how many of you in here are special educators? Just by a show of hands, okay? How many are administration, classroom teachers? Okay, so I didn't want to breeze through the slides if you don't know what we're going to be talking about here. So, what is accessibility? By definition, accessibility is the act of making something usable by as many people as possible. So, what accessibility might look like to you is having handicap ramps, elevators, and ADA compliant buildings. But as we move forward with technology and go one-to-one, we need to focus on technology accessibility. So we have the microphone, we have the closed captioning. Another thing that we took into consideration when preparing this presentation is making sure it was visually accessible. And what I mean by that is we ran our presentation colors through a program called Colorware. That's linked in the title there. And what it does is make sure that there's enough contrast for anyone who has any visual impairments. So, show of hands, who knows what universal design for learning is? Okay, so not a lot. Universal design for learning is making your classroom lessons accessible for everybody. So we know the research shows that there's kinesthetic, auditory, and visual learners. So it's making all of your lessons accessible to everyone in your entire classroom. So what we're going to do is go through Google Chrome and the Chromebook features to make classroom lessons accessible to everybody, and then some Chrome extensions after that.
So you'll notice that the captioning just stopped, and that's probably the result of the internet bouncing in and out. I'm noticing that it's popping in and out. I was looking on his. Yeah, that's part of the course at a technology conference. It pops in and out. So that's one of the features that you have to be aware of, is that if you have a connection that's a little spotty, you're going to have that connection pop in and out. So obviously one of the considerations, I mean, that's available. It's not something that has to be turned on by a Google administrator. It's available to anybody who uses slides, no matter if they're in a school domain or they're not in a school domain. But you have to be aware of that, because as I stopped talking and I looked to my left and I saw that, I noticed that it had stopped quite a bit before when I was sharing. You know, something I'm hoping that it picks up my words right. That's a consideration, and I think a lot of people don't consider those things. We have to make the best choice, and what we want to avoid is just turning on all of these features for everyone out of the box, right? How many of you use Chromebooks in some capacity within your district, whether it's with students, with staff? Excellent. On the admin console in the panel, when you set up a Chromebook to deploy to a student or a staff member, you can turn these things on by default. We choose not to. You know, the feature that has things being read to a student. Imagine if every kid in that classroom had that turned on for them. We'll talk a little bit more about that later, but some of these can be distracting, and we don't want to necessarily just turn everything on by default. One of my most favorite parts of this is that these things are hidden, but there are some shortcuts that allow you to be able to do some of these things. So if you hit Control Alt and then slash, that would be the one below the question mark, / /. I'm not really sure exactly which one those are officially, but that slash that goes that way. You turn that on. You can also go to a Chromebook shortcuts. That there's many of those that are out there. Some really nice ones that are turned on if you want to print that out for teachers. You want to give them those resources. But I like the Control Alt /. There used to be an overlay that Chromebooks all had. If anybody remembers that, you could do a couple of different keystrokes and overlay. It would show you the keyboard and exactly what to do. If you hit Control, what are all the keys that you can use? They don't do that anymore. But a lot of these are some of the basics. You know, the ones that we're very familiar with. Control Z, Control C, but then also Control Z for undo, and then as well as some others. Like I said before, we don't turn on Chrome accessibility or Chromebooks accessibility for everyone. So it has to be turned on. So if you're using a Chromebook for the first time, that accessibility icon may or may not be there. And you can find that by going to the time and status pill. Here's a little tip, I bet you didn't, maybe you didn't know, that the little area in the lower right-hand corner is called the time and status pill. For 2 years, I had no idea what that was called. And then I heard someone say the time and status pill. Why is it called a time and status pill? Well, because it's shaped like a pill, and there's time and status there. Oh, genius, thank you. So you hit the time and status pill, and then it gives you that accessibility. When you turn that on, it by default gives you some things that you can quickly turn on, whether that's the dictation, which I turn on because I've broken my hand, and I'm having a little bit of trouble navigating the keyboard appropriately. Maybe you want to turn high contrast mode on, automatic clicks, whatever it might be. It gives you the basics right there. Now, if you go to settings, the gear, and then you go into accessibility, you have a little bit more functionality, a few more features, a few things that you can turn on. As you know, within Chrome, within Chromebooks, you have a multitude of different ways to be able to get into these functions. Now, obviously, all you have to do is ask the student, and they will tell you exactly how to do many of these things, right? You don't have to worry about the keystrokes, you don't have to worry about any of these. You just ask a student, hey, can you tell me how to turn on dictation? Oh, they'll find it. They'll simply click the settings, and then they'll do in the search bar, and they'll type dictation, or they'll just start Googling or clicking things, and they will find it for us, right? I wouldn't do this in front of my younger students. I may not do it in front of our older students, but I certainly would let them know that these tools are available to them in some cases. I think when we talk about seeing things out of the box, a couple of very easy things that are not only important for us to know for our students who need to zoom in or zoom out, but I get this question all the time in our help ticket system. Why is the screen zoomed in so far? I can't see anything. Using those little things, Control-0 to reset it back to, or the next student gets the device because they're sharing devices in that class. This looks terrible, everything's zoomed in. From anywhere, whether you're on the login screen or you're logged into any device, if you use Control+, Control- for decrease, or that Control-0 will automatically reset, okay? So the words zoom in and zoom out within the browser on a Chromebook. That is very different from the whole screen zooming in. So if you want the tabs, if you want the URL bar, if you want all of those other pieces, you have to add the shift to that. Control-Shift+, Control-Shift-, Control-Shift-0, it screens those in and out. So those two concepts are very different, and they meet the needs of different groups of people. You know, sometimes looking at that browser tab, it's too small. The icons are too small, so they need to have that zoomed in just a little bit to be able to get that accessibility for those things. There is the built-in magnifier. Again, this is something that is turned on by students, and then it becomes very difficult for the next student who is easily distracted, because this magnifier, everywhere they move their mouse, it's zoomed into that particular area. Great for presenting when you're working with students. You turn on the magnifier, enable that, Control-Alt, and this 2 scroll finger on the touchpad allows you to scroll in and out of particular areas. All the time we have students looking at the browser bar. What's the address that I'm going to? We can zoom in on that address. Or we can have students who need to zoom in on something in particular, whether they're in Maps or they're in something else. Whatever they're in that browser, they have that ability to have that full screen or that area magnifier, which is super helpful for them. Here's the one I get all the time. They make the mouse and the cursor the bigger, okay? You know, I do it all the time, but I'm 43 years of age and I have multiple screens, and I'm like, where is my mouse? I can't find it, and then I use my trackpad or my mouse. I'm like, where is it? I can't find it. There's a lot of students who need that ability to be able to find that little mouse. There's also students who just turn it on because they love to turn that on. They want to see that larger ability. So you can turn on that large mouse cursor, and you can adjust the size, okay, from the default to all the way to quite large. High contrast mode. We've gotten in recent years a number of students who have some visual impairments, and they need to have less of that blue, that white light that's shining at them. They switch to high contrast mode. User tip, I'm sure you probably all know this, when you switch to that, it also saves on battery. So if a kid is getting low on battery because you have a one-to-one program that's take home and the student didn't charge it last night, you can have students switch to high contrast mode and it saves the battery just a little bit, not a ton, but it will save that battery just a little bit until they're able to get that to a charge or something like that. Some people just prefer this. I know that a lot of devices, in particular the Apple iPhone, which is one of the most recent updates within the past year, they switched that ability to have dark mode versus light mode. This is the same concept. A lot of people just prefer that dark mode over that light mode in many ways. Again, another great feature, folks, when they're completing forms or they're completing documents, they're losing where that cursor went. So the idea of circling and focusing on that text caret by having the insertion point circled or boxed, whatever it might be, as they're maybe tabbing through it, it will highlight. They can set the highlight color, it highlights, and then it automatically fades away from that particular color. A great feature, particularly if they're not using the mouse and they're using the tabbing functions within that Chromebook. Super helpful. It also can be super distracting for folks if it's turned on and it pulls away from that, because then they just simply tab across things, they find something and they start hitting tabs so they can see the colors popping up on the particular screen, right? Again, there has to be a balance with these. Sometimes it is better not to turn on some of these functions for a student because while it may help them and make it a little bit more accessible, it may also pull away and decrease the accessibility for that particular student. That's why it has to be on an individual basis for sure. Motor function opportunities, you can have on-screen keyboard, you can turn that up. That also supports handwriting if you have touchscreen as well as dictation pieces. But if a student isn't able to type and only uses a mouse, or they have a standalone mouse that's plugged into and they have the ability to type that way, certainly is helpful. Or if you have touch screen Chromebooks, that can be super helpful for them as well if they're using a stylus to type, whatever that might be. There are also a ton of other types of physical and keyboard and touchpad settings, automatic clicks, turning off that double clicking or tap to click on the touchpad. I prefer not to have my touchpad tap. Like if I tap my touchpad, I don't want it to go on, but for some students, you need to turn that off because every time they touch the touchpad, it will advance or it will move on to something or will select something different. Lastly is the hearing, turning on audio captions, making sure that you turn on captions whenever it's available and you have a solid internet connection within Google Slides. But then also, great feature that it has, whenever you turn on or have a student who uses headphones, you can turn it on to mono audio so that instead of having it coming through two headphones, it comes through one, all of it comes through either the right or the left. Super important because if they're hearing information that's coming into the right ear and there's content coming through the left, they're missing that. Also good to know that if a student has accidentally cut an earbud off on one of their headphones and they only have the right ear, you can turn on mono so they can get all the content. Mr. Smith, my headphones don't work. I only got one ear. Oh great, here we go. We're going to turn you on mono. You can get the same content for everybody in that piece. Last, what I was talking about that can be a distraction is the select to speak. I've turned off the audio on this so that we don't get that, and it's distracting for folks. The great part about this is that you can turn that on and that the select to speak can read various pieces on that screen. You also have the Chromevox screen reader. It can come in a variety of different languages. It can read a number of pieces. That's Control-Alt-Z to be able to enable that and disable that. That's an important piece because as students are hearing that and the screens are reading, you have a classroom of 15, 20, 25 kids who all enable this at the exact same time, and then everything is reading at them. That might distract one or two people in the classroom. So you want to just, again, be very careful with the use of these, but also know that when the Chromebook is delivered to your school and it's enrolled and it's ready to go, it has the ability to be functional and accessible to those who have those challenges or those needs that they have. It's also rather good for just general people who have done dumb things in their life and they need those types of tools to be able to continue to be productive at work so that they don't get in trouble for not getting their work done. So there are a lot of different features there. So Braille support is also embedded within that if you have that. So within the slides, if you are able to open that up, what we've done is we've created a back channel. It really is just a Google document that we're going to make a transition here. I'm going to talk a little bit about that. That transition is, that back channel is just, if you have anything that you'd like to add to the conversation, please feel free to add it in there, and we'll continue to monitor that throughout the rest of the presentation as Chris is going through a number of the different features within Chrome, because now we're going to transition away from, and these are always available within the Chromebook environment or a Windows or a Mac environment, but this is going to be specific to Chrome. But if you have anything to add that you want to talk about or you just want to add as a resource, this back channel or this Google Doc will be available to anyone, so you can add resources in there, so that honestly the smartest person in the room is the room. We just happen to be standing up in front of here and spewing at you for the next few minutes. So, but we'd love to get your expertise, and if there's questions that we can chat about, or there's something that you want to make sure that we talk about before the end or at the very end, we certainly will do that. Okay, cool.
All right, so Tim kind of went over out-of-the-box Chromebook items, and now I'm going to show you some web extensions that can be added on to any Chrome device. It doesn't have to be a Chromebook. As long as you're running Google Chrome on your computer, you can add these extensions on. If you are unfamiliar with extensions and apps, while you're in Chrome, you click on Apps and find the Web Store, and this is where you're able to download all of the extensions that I'm going to go over. Okay, so first we're going to start with text-to-speech. The first extension, and these are just my top favorites. There's about 10 of them. So like Tim said, on the Padlet, if you have some that I've missed or that you like, put them on there so that we can add them to our future presentations. The first one is Read and Write. And all of your extensions, when you add them on, come up to your bookmark bar up here. When you enable Read and Write, this one gives you a bunch of different features. It has reading out loud, it has highlighting text, which is great for students who are doing reading comprehension. I'll give an example of what the reading out loud sounds like.
Multiple outbreaks of the novel coronavirus outside of mainland China have continued to worsen.
So you can change the voice on that too. This one has a lot of different features. It has a built-in dictionary, among other things. With the apps, as you all probably already know, you're going to get some free stuff, and then the good stuff you have to pay for. So you can see this one's on a trial subscription, and a couple of the really nice features you have to pay for. But just for reading things out loud, it's good. The next one is Announceify. This is, again, is just going to be a read out loud. They have a little bit different formats.
You are now listening to Coronavirus Cases Top 80,000 as Markets Plunge on Pandemic Fears. Slideshow by
ads on the side. I won't play this one again, but this is another read aloud. Some people prefer this one. That's called read aloud because it has a small interface. When you click on it, it's just a play and a pause.
Read aloud. Read aloud is a crime.
So it doesn't take up your whole screen. For readability, Mercury Reader, if you go to a news source, like I'm using the same article for all of them so you can see the differences. With one click of Mercury Reader, it takes out all of the images, making it a little bit easier for the kids to read and not get distracted.
That's printable, right?
Yeah, yep. You can print the Mercury Reader one. Beeline Reader changes all of the text to different colors, and there's research to support that this actually increases reading fluency. So this is something that I just added on to mine, and I do seem like I read a little bit faster with it. I'm not sure why, but it helps with visual impairments. And you can change the colors. All of these have multitude of different settings. You can change the voices, you can change the colors to whatever your specific needs may be. If you're colorblind, you can't see red, then obviously the red and blue is not going to work for you. Crafty Zoom is an additional zooming in tool for anyone with visual impairments. Open Dyslexia is just what it sounds like. For any students who have dyslexia, you can go to any web page and enable Open Dyslexia, and this is a font that helps people with dyslexia read. This is the Again, research supported. This is the most readable font, and it changes any website. And then lastly, we have readline. So this will help struggling readers. Take off the readline breaks down articles into single words, so they can practice reading. This speed can be adjusted, colors can be adjusted, anything you want really. So this is just for public struggling readers. So those are my top 10 that I use for extensions, but give me one sec. Like Tim said, accessibility, the whole idea is so vast right now, and there's just hundreds of different extensions that you can use. The last one I'll show you is LipSurf, which is for anyone who has any kind of physical disability or impairment and needs to navigate with their voice.
Dictation mode. Hey Jim, comma, please send me your TPS reports at your earliest convenience, period. Be more productive by dictating text instead of typing, period. Dictate, Jim can't swim. Pause. Play. Scroll down. Little down. Auto scroll. Go to nytimes.com. Tag. BC. Go to R Comics. Expand second.
We won't watch the whole video, but they just did a little bit of a better job than I could do trying to navigate all that in a short time period. You had your hand up earlier.
Yeah, was it your reader that was reading your Google slide?
I think any of the very first three that I mentioned, the read and write, the Announceify, or the read aloud, should do it.
LipSurf, speech recognition for executing commands.
Yeah, so all of them should do it for Google Slides. Or for any web page, any of those read aloud should work.
Do any of them read in multiple languages?
Yeah. Yeah, read aloud. So if you go into the settings of read aloud, and in most of them, you can change the languages, you can change the accent, different pronunciations. Yeah, it's all in the settings of everything.
So one really good question that was asked on the Padlet was, do you purchase these individually or as a district or as a domain? You have a couple of different options, and as you may be surprised, updates are coming to Google. I believe they update over 600 times a year, various pieces of their elements, whether that's slides or docs or Drive or Chrome in and of itself. Many different updates are happening. One of the ways that this can be done is at the domain level. So a G Suite administrator would have the ability to purchase, and that's a relative term. Everything that we shared with you today is completely free. We, in our district, like to be frugal with things, and obviously when you're looking at add-ons and extensions, when you're using those with students, you have to be aware of COPA. So you have to make sure that you're following those guidelines that are set within your district about the approval of using those, because some of them would require individual installation by the students if that's the method that you go. My disclaimer for all of that is, regardless, whomever kind of monitors that for your district if you're looking at an add-on, an extension, anything that changes the environment, that's not the out of the box, or it's something that comes by default with Chrome, you should probably have a conversation with that person so that you can review, or the person can review, terms of service and privacy policy. Those are important pieces to take a look at that. The ones that we're using and we have shown, they would meet our standards at our district. But I also know that some school districts have a higher threshold and a lower threshold. So you have to take a look at those and you have to have the conversation with those folks. So coming back to it, you can purchase them, and by purchase it could be just click to install, which is technically the purchase. It's just like the App Store if you're familiar with Apple. You buy something, sometimes it's free, sometimes it costs a fee. Generally, most of the apps within the Chrome Web Store are free. There are many that do have paid services. Like Chris said, some of these require a subscription so you can use it. They have that freemium piece where a lot of the stuff that you want to use initially is great, and then all of a sudden you want to do something a little bit more advanced, like maybe add more languages or something like that. You suddenly lose access, or you don't have access to those particular features. So you have to be cautious of that, and you have to be wary of that. Sometimes they change in the middle of a year. Padlet would be a great example of an ed tech tool that was free forever to anyone, and then all of a sudden there was a premium service. So you could get a certain number available, and then they locked that down. The opposite of that was Flipgrid. Flipgrid had limitations, and then you had to pay for it, and then Microsoft purchased them and said, here you go. There's a whole lot more free to you. That rarely happens within our community, as you're well aware. But a lot of these extensions and add-ons do have that premium feature. You can purchase those at a district level. There is not a multi-discount store just yet for education users within the Chrome environment like Apple has, but they will work with you. So if you're looking to add something to a building or to a district level, you do have that ability to reach out to them, and often you can ask them for free trials, you can ask them for a classroom set. There are a variety of things that a lot of these companies would be willing to work with to be able to get some of those premium features. So, but as a Google domain administrator, that person within your organization does have the ability to install either across the domain, within particular organizational units, which depending upon how you have it structured, in our district, I can deliver it by building, by year of graduation, grade. I can deliver it to students but not teachers, teachers not students, admins, student teachers and not student teachers. So depending upon how it's broken down, you can deliver them to different units, whether it's a free or it's a paid for app. So you have that capability. Yeah.
Do you have any good extensions for English language learners?
As far as having it read out loud or practicing the reading?
Well, some of my materials I will have a Spanish version or something like that, but I teach social studies, I do a lot of current events, and if I pull an article off CNN, I'm not necessarily going to have the Spanish version available to me.
Okay.
So I didn't know if it was...
The read and write, the very first one I have here with the taskbar, has a translator built into it. So that's why I said some of these have multiple features embedded. So the read and write specifically, it might be part of the premium package to do an entire article, but does have a translator built in. Keep in mind too, we talk specifically about Google, but if you have a Mac, all of the out-of-the-box features, those are on Mac as well. You just access them a little bit differently. PC, or if you're using Google Chrome with Mac, all of these extensions will work. So it's really across the whole board. We just focused on Google because we're a Google district. Any other questions? All right. If you need anything from us, we'll be up here. If you want me to show you how to do anything specifically with extensions, come on up. If you have any further questions for us, let us know. If not,
You'll be first in line at lunch.
First in line at lunch.
Appreciate you taking the time to be with us.
yeah, for sure.
Now that Bitly forces you to make a copy. If you don't know how to create that on a slide, if you want to share that with people and you don't want them messing with your original and you want them to have a copy of your own, in the URL of the document, it works with any document, you change the word edit at the very end to copy, and it will automatically force someone to make a copy if you send them that link. So,
Could you repeat that?
absolutely I can. So, if you're looking at any URL of any Google document, whether it's a slide, sheet, drawing, doc, whatever, at the very end there's a section that says edit. Any document, you change the sharing settings, you look at edit. If you replace the word edit with copy, and then you send someone that link, it will automatically force that person to make a copy of this document, so they have their very own. Okay? So whenever you go into our slide, you'll notice, I'm going to jack this up. So I just changed this to copy. All of the URL is exactly the same, except when I get to the word edit, everything from the E in edit to the right, I've replaced with the word copy. I hit enter, and now it forces the person who's gone to that URL to make a copy of that document. And they have a copy of Chromebook and G Suite Accessibility Presentation PDC 2020. Super helpful. Yes?
At the beginning, you said that you put the slides through colorware to make sure that the contrast is very high. Is that usage also, or is that
That's a website that's linked, and there's a bunch of different versions. I just use Colorware. Your district website should probably be accessible and have the contrasting colors. Not everybody is, but you you run it through here, Colorware, and it gives you a scale of how accessible it actually is, and it goes from like 0 to 20, I believe. Each website has different scales, but the higher you are, the more compliant you are with the contrasting colors being accessible.
so that what was it?
Colorsafe.co. It's linked in this title slide. Yeah, it's right there. And please feel free to use our presentation. Go back to your districts and share this with everybody.
It's yours now.
Yeah.
You don't have to give us credit.
All right. Thanks.
Thanks so much, everyone. Have a great rest of the Tuesday.
I was trying to get there quick so that they didn't kick me off again.
everybody have a great day. I think that would be a great slide piece to just have, like, our poster.
Which is this part should have been a poster. We should have done a poster. When we do a poster.